Oh, yeah.
So we looked at a session which was about should access and WP change with the new context. So in light of the issues around student success or experience engagement, we looked at how WP could influence the strategic importance which teaching is given as opposed to research within the institution. And there's a whole lot of things that then go with that. What's the value placed on it in terms of promotion, etc., etc. So it's just recognising that. That was linked to, from our Swedish colleagues, talking about pedagogic challenges and how do you work with academic staff on developing pedagogy, and we shared approaches generally in the UK, but again it has to be specific to the institution, and then we looked at how WP staff could work with that. And we saw various models of how people do already deliver on the PG cert, but they could be other ways of doing that. We highlighted from colleagues some worrying aspects on admissions requirements, particularly in terms of maths and literacy for level 3-ness required, and that was having a knock-on effect on access courses and requiring pre-access courses. We looked quite a lot at the issue about working with students to raise their awareness of issues around social mobility, could include disability and other aspects. So it depends on your context. That could be institutions where there aren't a great deal of students from non-traditional groups. So how do you make them aware of issues so that they can work in schools? And I think, we identified with the rise of Students' Union doing a number of these things, there needs to be productive relationships, so I put it like that, between WP outreach teams and Student Union outreach teams. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. And then I thought a very interesting one from one colleague looking at how in their institution they were having a completely fresh look at the provision for part-time students and thinking, well, who are these students and what are we offering them? Mm-hmm. Not just as work-based learning or something like that, but actually how we're looking at the whole aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. Liz, do you want to feedback anything from your group? Just headlines. Yes, please. Yeah, if you could, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay.
Just wanted to.
We were looking at the definition and implementation of retention and success, and agreed, I think, that retention is a fairly narrow definition and also potentially unhelpful, engaging wider colleagues in the institution in changing what goes on. So we also recognise that success can kind of mean anything to everybody from, actually leaving early for some students might be quite successful, and it might be about progression to postgraduate study and those sorts of things. So in fact, success is a very subjective topic. So we started to look at the ways in which you might measure it. And a couple of institutions are looking at sort of distance travelled and those kind of ideas which are important around success. One Bradford College is looking at academic distance travelled and is doing that on a kind of personal one-to-one basis, which I admire, but I'm not volunteering to help with that. That seems like a huge task for 4,000 students to be kind of working with. So we started to look at other methodologies that might be more appropriate, so looking at surveying students beginning and end, or also just taking a wider range of success indicators, which is probably the most realistic about things, but wanting to include that personal success as well as that academic success, so about developing confidence and other things that take you beyond your higher education experience. And so the suggestion from Eric from Sweden was around actually using our alumni to help us define what success is, so with a longer term sort of looking back on what they got out of their higher education experience. So I think we agreed that success is a useful term, but really difficult to operationalise and even more difficult to measure, but something perhaps we want to think about a bit more.
Thank you, Liz. Melanie, do you want to just do a quick feedback?
Ever wanting to be cheerful, I think the message that came very strongly out of this morning's discussion that we had also came out this afternoon, which was it's all about the money. And, well, that's a bit sad. Nonetheless, this is a situation we've fought for many years, and so there's no doubt we'll carry on fighting it. The area we were looking at this afternoon was our institutions fully embracing the diversity of provision. The short answer was no, But there was quite a lot of interesting evidence from around the group on different things that were going on. It did help having an OU representative there. But there was a lot of discussion about different things that were going on. But nonetheless, the practical issues and the practical difficulties that stem from that just don't seem to go away, because the overwhelming paradigm for higher education is a 3-year full-time on-site program for young learners. And this diversity of provision no doubt cuts across that. And the problem is that this full-time 3-year model is the one which is held by our top politicians. And so they work on these assumptions, and that the sorts of groups, the target groups that we're talking about, are in the margins and not part of their personal experience. We finally also looked at some of the strategic imperatives which may support or cut across all different sorts of provision. And sadly, at the moment, most of those strategic imperatives seem to mitigate against diversity of provision, financing, funding, the academic year, all sorts of things like this, conditions of service for staff, and so on, August being a no-no, you know, all sorts of things work against this. But there was one shred of hope in that there was one report given of how change had come about as a result of student feedback via satisfaction surveys, and how that had improved the lot of part-time and other non-traditional learners through that. So that is an area that we can just sort of keep working on.
Thank you. Thanks, Mel. Okay, Viv?
Right, we had the philosophical question, which was targeting or changing the whole institutional culture. Well, I think everybody had experience of targeting. Not too many institutions in our group had experience of changing the whole institutional culture. So the whole institutional culture tended to get a bit kind of sidelined in the discussion. We looked at various aspects of targeting and why people did it. One very interesting answer was that it actually helped keep out the middle classes, who tended to overrun any apparent advantage in terms of HE participation. There was an issue about whether, in fact, people should be allowed to make choices about the institution they go to, or whether institutions should strive to become responsive to all potential students. And that was, I think, a debate which we never bottomed out, but which will run and run. There was certainly a sense that institutions should understand which constituencies they are not recruiting and should become more responsive to the needs of those constituencies, but whether that actually meant that there should be a whole institutional change on the back of that was another matter. We did look at at institutions such as UEL and Wolverhampton, where there was a preponderance of widening participation students, and what that meant in terms of the strains and stresses on the institutions themselves in terms of the allocation of resources. Some institutions, in ensuring that students were supported once they were through the doors, put on extra provision, for example, around ensuring that particular constituency was retained. And there was still a tendency to focus on students because of their background and define them as at risk because of their background, rather than because of poor performance or because they were demonstrating poor behaviour. So we were still, we were still in a fairly traditional mode in terms of targeting students once they were in the institution. There was an interesting comment from one of our Swedish colleagues who said, what about targeting the staff? And that seemed to be quite an interesting idea, but possibly more in line with the idea of developing the inclusive institution rather than in conventional targeting. We looked at various drag factors, and most of those appeared to be about misperception about what widening participation was, often on the part of colleagues within institutions who felt that widening participation must imply some kind of drop in standards. And then there was also a great final wail about the lack of data, the lack of opportunities to develop data within institutions because of resource issues, and the fact that UCAS does not allow students access to, institutions access to information about where students on individual outreach courses have gone. So universities cannot track their outreach students other than into their own institutions, so they do not know how effective their provision actually is. So there's lots and lots to go at, and while we did not answer any of the questions you set us, we had a great time.
Well, that's what matters, really. Who else? Have I missed any of the groups out?
Yes, the postgraduate.
Who is the A person for postgrad? Oh, is she here? Marva, was you in the postgraduate group? Do you want do you want to make a comment? Quick.
Hilarious.
Come on, quick, come on. Sorry to put that on you without any prep, but
So
just
anyone that was
headline.
in the group, please
Yeah.
do pitch in.
Okay.
It was difficult, it was challenging. There were all sorts of discussions about how we define what the postgraduate student is from a WP background, and that it was probably a bit difficult to try to even think about what we might do about it if we don't even know what the issues are in terms of who those students are. We talked about the importance of the vocational route for postgraduate students, so those students who were on postgraduate qualifications that had a very clear vocational basis, that there was a more likely to get buy-in from employers because they were more likely to want to work with students who were on those professionally or vocationally based postgraduate courses. The need for perhaps some collaboration in this area was also mentioned on every front, really, from identifying students to what sort of things we could do with students to encourage them onto postgraduate qualifications, such as taster days, transitional programs, etc. And I think those were the three main points. Did I miss anything else major? Anybody? No?
Great job.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Marva. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but well done. Okay, I think we're just about there. Was it another group? We're done. Okay, good. All right. So thank you very much to all the facilitators for that. Thank you all for your participation, in which I think has been a really good day, excellent day. Feedback seems to be really good. A couple of just last things I need to say. A couple of people asked me, we mentioned earlier on that Action Access is working with Offer and HEFC once the guidance comes out, as we did last year, to run a day's workshop where you can kind of look at the guidance and what should be in your Action Access agreement and so on. And that will be here on the 25th of February. So we've changed the timing from last year, so it's a month or so after the guidance comes out. It gives a chance for people to read through it and then come here and meet with Offer and HEFC colleagues to kind of get a handle on that integrated, what is a SAF? SAS. Yeah, I'll get used to it soon. You know what I mean. The thing you have to write and send back. And so it's the 25th of February here, but it'll be on the website and we'll write round to people that come today to remind you of that. So I think all that remains for me to say is thank you for participating today. We have a festive drink for you at the back of the room. Don't all rush on. So do grab a glass of wine or some orange juice or something before you go, and have a great Christmas break as well, if I can say that. And we've got the Christmas tree here. And thank you for your participation again today. Thank you.